Ervin Laszlo, izvorno klasični pijanist, mađarski je filozof znanosti, sistemski teoretičar i promicatelj ideje kvantne svijesti. Objavio je 75 knjiga i preko 400 znanstvenih radova. Uređuje časopis Budućnosti svijeta, žurnal opće evolucije, a od 2004. godine član je Mađarske akademije znanosti. 1984. bio je suosnivač grupe za opća evolucijska istraživanja, koja je okupljala grupu znanstvenika i mislioca iza željezne zavjese s ciljem korištenja teorije kaosa na pitanjima razvoja svijeta. 1993. osnovao je Budimpeštanski klub sa sličnim ciljem stavljanja pažnje na razvoj ljudskih vrijednosti i svjesnosti u smjeru humanizma, etike i globalne samoodrživosti. Gospodine Laszlo, dobar dan.
Very good to be here.
Eto, u organizaciji Međunarodne udruge za sistemske konstelacije, koja je svoj kongres održala sredinom rujna u Lovranu, u organizaciji lokalnih konstelatora Alemke i Maxa Dauskarta, došli ste i ovdje u Hrvatsku, pa nam se pružila prilika da popričamo o mnogobranim vašim knjigama i zapravo bi možda mogli početi od tog drevnog vremena kako ste se uopće počeli baviti temom koja vas je dovela do spajanja znanosti i akašičkog polja.
I have always been interested in how things relate to each other, how systems are formed. I started working really with the idea that nature consists of interdependent, interacting systems, whether we call them live biological systems or physical systems, atoms and molecules and entire planets perhaps, you know. But they are systems that are ensembles of the parts, and the parts belong together, and the parts affect each other. But then I came across the idea, and more evidence, that not only the parts of a system are affecting each other, also the systems themselves have an effect on one another. So there is connection. Now, how do we explain connection? The classical scientific theories can only talk about mechanical connection on the basis of the exchange of energy, of measurable energy. But the connection that, for which we have evidence that come to light are closer, are faster, and more embracing than we could explain simply by energy exchanging between independent units, independent entities. So there must be something that connects the systems. Now, when you have two different things, or independent things that are connected, then of course they are no longer independent. In science, you say something that transmits the connection is called a field. It's something continuous. E and B are themselves seem separate, but if they are connected, there is something underlying there, connecting them together. So this notion of field is a very basic element already of 20th century science, especially the latter part of the 20th century. And it's absolutely basic now in the 21st century. So the notion of field. Field is something which is continuous, and then you can try to think of how can we explain the origin of field, the workings of field, how is field related to an individual entity. But to answer your question, I started working on the notion of a continuous field on the basis of increasing evidence that there is connection between things, in fact that we cannot explain the development, the evolution of different things, whether they are organisms or planets, or anything else, we cannot explain except that we assume that there is a field connecting the entities, so that what happens in one entity also happens in the other one.
Ključni dio nekog novog znanstvenog svjetonazora, dakle, nije da je riječ samo o materiji i energiji, već i aktivnoj i učinkovitoj informaciji, koju je David Bohm nazvao informacija. Kakva bi to u stvari bila informacija i zbog čega ta crtica između koje čini različitom od stare riječi informacija?
Information, written in one word, is what we produce. When we talk to each other, we are conveying information. We can write it down in letters or in emails, and it's information. Any form of communication that's coherent, that's understandable, at least in principle, means the conveyance, the transmission of information. Now, information is something completely different. We could find a entirely different concept for it, except that there is already this concept of spelling it with a hyphen coming from David Bohm, which corresponds to this idea of that there is something given in nature which forms the things that exist in nature. Now, this something can be considered the laws of nature, can be considered in modern parlance attractors, things that define and determine how things evolve, how things become also, how things act. Because things do not act in a random fashion. There is a certain amount of chaos in nature, but it's very, very limited, on limited dimensions. Below and above chaos, we always find some level of order. If there wouldn't be this overriding order in nature, we wouldn't be here to talk about it, because we are ourselves coherent, ordered entities. And we're dealing with a universe that seems to be ordered and coherent. Einstein, Pauli, Schrödinger, Jung, Robert Jung, and all these great scientists went as far as to say that the most remarkable fact about nature, about the universe, about our experience of the universe, is that it is ordered, that it is coherent and not random. So there is something in the universe which creates order, and this something informs it. Now think of it this way. If there is something which informs something, A is there as an agent of information, and B is something that is being informed. Now, if they would be on the same level, in the same domain, we might say in the same universe, then what is being informed would influence, would act on the informing entity also, the informing factor. But the laws of nature, as far as we know, do not change. And there are some basic elements, basic attractors, you might call it, or basic tendencies, which seem to be given, and the world unfolds according to them. Because if they wouldn't be given, if they themselves would change, then they would be part of an ongoing, evolving entity, and it would not be coherent, because every time any one thing changes, everything else would change in it. We need something that is enduring in order to understand things. We must assume that that something is given. For example, nowadays there is a consensus that at the so-called Big Bang, this energy explosion 13.8 billion years ago approximately, at that point, with the universe as we know it has been created, but at that point, the laws of nature were given already. Because think what happened. As far as we can tell, this potential quantum field, which was the universe, which must have been the universe prior to the Big Bang, became to actualize, became ordered in some way. Now, if there was total chaos, then we wouldn't know anything about it. You know. But there were some elements in that universe. And that element, it was such, for example, that one particle selectively could join another particle. Protons and neutrons could join together and form the atomic nucleus. Sequentially more complex entities could form, and we can recognize these coherent entities by the protons, the neutrons, the atomic nucleus accepting electrons. One electron, then you have hydrogen, two electrons, then you have helium, and so on, up to the entire scale of the periodic table of the elements, up to the very heavy elements, uranium and beyond. So this universe is ordered, is evolving according to, it seems, some basic rules. And these basic rules are not part of the evolving universe. So I'm coming back to your questions. What is information? Information is the action of the informing element on what is being informed. If what is informed is the manifest universe, is what we observe or what can be observed, then the informing element is something that acts on this. An example would be the game of chess or any organized activity according to rules. The rules of chess are given when you start playing the game, and they don't change. You can't change these rules, otherwise you wouldn't have the same game. But the rules are the same whether the game is played well or badly by a beginner or a grandmaster. And no matter how many times it's played, the rules are given. So what informs the universe is something that is given. And that something given is not in the same dimension, not on the same level as what it forms. So information is the action of forming by the basic rules of the universe, the laws of nature. Everything that is given in the universe, which forms, which makes this universe and not another universe, and not a chaotic universe, but a coherent universe. That means that this universe is informed. You and I are coherent entities. Our human world, even though it seems chaotic, it still has coherence, can find the coherence. And the whole universe has coherence. And that is because the universe, the observed universe, is informed. So in quantum science, according to David Bohm, for example, we can talk about the explicate and the implicate order. The explicate is what we observe. That's the manifest universe, what has been informed. The implicate order is that they folded in all the laws of nature, everything that is given is in the implicate order. So you can say the implicate order informs the explicate order. In other words, the laws of nature inform the physical, the known, manifest universe.
Staro je pitanje kako je iz jedne eksplozije nastao strukturirani i uređeni svemir, no mogli bi sad proći kroz nekoliko primjera koji pokazuju da takva povezanost doista postoji na svim razinama, zbog toga jer se polja često puta manifestiraju kroz djelovanje, a ne tako da ih se može same vidjeti. Primjer je vjetar koji recimo stvara valove i slično. Pa možemo krenuti od ugođenosti kozmičkih konstanti da postoji svemir, a možda kasnije doći do pitanja svijesti i nekih drugih fenomena.
Well, space in the everyday definition is something which is in between real things. Space itself is either filled or empty. If it's filled, it means that there is something continuously in space which connects things. If it's empty, it means that there is no thing in space. It's empty, it's a vacuum. Now, for a long time, physics, modern day physics, talked about the vacuum. The vacuum is empty space. There is no thing in it. But modern quantum physics then found that there is no such thing. That energy fields, and we can also now say information fields, are continuously present, no matter whether the entities that we observe with our eyes and ears are present or not. So space is not empty but filled. And space is not something that separates. In the old concept, A and B are separated by the space that's in between. In the new concept, A and B, whatever they may be, are connected by the space they occupy. So space is not something different from what there is in it. Space is the framework for the things that exist, within which they can exist. Space is what is given. So space, to use the term that we used a little while ago, space is a field. Universal space, space in nature, in the cosmos, in the universe, is a universal field. Is nowadays we know it's a field filled with fluctuations, filled with energies. Some of them are virtual energies. Not all of them are these mechanical forms of energy. But they all, space is something that is continuously in fluctuation, continuously in movement, in evolution. And that is what we observe are points in space. So it changes their concept. It's not space is the absence of things. Space is the foundation within which things appear. What we observe are manifestations of space. So at that point, it's just as well not to use the term space because it becomes completely transformed. We use the term field, more or less quantum field or universal field or grand unified field. These are all expressions which talk about a continuum which connects things, which in itself we could recognize as the basic existent. This is what exists in the world. And the points that we perceive with our eyes and ears, with our senses, are particular critical points, are particular elements of that continuously existing field. For example, points where the quantum waves are in phase so that they become coherent. And they were within given frequencies, within given amplitudes, and they are in phase. Then we can perceive this continuum as an entity. But actually what we see, what we live in, what there really exists is a continuum, a field continuum, which we can call a plenum, taking from the Latin word, instead of a vacuum, which is empty. A plenum is fillness, a fullness, a full something. That is a field, that is a quantum field of the universe itself. So space is ultimately the universe itself, and what we observe are elements of that which are themselves observable, but that they are separate is not true. Einstein said himself that the separateness of things is a kind of an optical illusion due to our everyday interaction with the world around us, but it doesn't exist in itself.
Kvantna fizika nam je dala pojmove nelokalnost i spregnutost i ti pojmovi su se do sada još uvijek također, jer još nije došlo vrijeme da se taj pogled toliko promijeni, odnosili na sitne, dakle podzemlje stvarnosti gdje se vidjelo da na neki način čestice reagiraju kao da nema prostora između njih i trenutno. I naravno da se iz fizike također uočilo i da postoji barem 30-ak univerzalnih parametara, to se zove fina ugođenost univerzalnih konstanti, zbog čega uopće naš svemir može biti, čini se, pogodan i baš podešen za ljudski život i sad tu kreću rasprave je li to slučajno ili nije. U svakom slučaju ta lokalnost i spregnutost koja je godinama bila vezana uz tu sitnost i istraživanje doista sitnih razina, prisutna je i na makrorazini, pa se i živi organizmi mogu promatrati kao makroskopski kvantni sustavi koje na neki način odlikuje i nelokalnost i spregnutost ili, kako ste vi to rekli, koherencija. Pa možemo li za primjer nečega što će svatko shvatiti promotriti ovaj naš živi organizam upravo kao koherentni sustav koji također ima svoje informacijsko polje koje je na neki način odraz onog kako i širi i veći sustavi funkcioniraju na drugim razinama?
Well, if the reality, if the universe is really a continuous quantum system, then if we see something in that which is entity, which is matter-like, I'm not saying it's material because I thought that there is something separate that is called matter. But if in this field, which is a continuum, a plenum, if you see certain entities, is because there is coherence, local coherence. The field has a global coherence. All the universe is connected all through. This universe is a hologram. A hologram in that sense that in this globally coherent field, all the information, everything that makes the universe what it is given in every part. Because the example for this is the hologram that we can create ourselves. Create an image, for example, within an array, an optical array, and then you can view that image from any small part of that array, of the field. You can project it on the screen, and you can look at any one part of this field, of the screen, and you see the total image. You see the full image, you see, because it's all there. So every information, everything that makes the universe a coherent entity is part in every part of it. Is there in every part of it. So when we see things that as entities, as distinguishable space and time-based entities, is because we extract through our attention, we create that local coherence, and that we perceive that local coherence as a separate things. But it's not separate things. So our body shows, but also astronomy shows, and psychology shows, and physics shows, and biology shows, that the elements of systems are non-local. In other words, nothing is fully confined to local positions. Nothing you can say is only here and now. The single points of space and time do not exist. That was a mechanical concept. It was a Newtonian concept, very useful for calculation. And some aspects of the universe are as if they would be local. But in a global field, nothing can be local, because every part of it is connected with every other. Every part has the information of the whole. So basically, we are dealing with a continuum in which we perceive things as though they would be separate. And then it appears that these separate things are connected. Of course they are connected, just like one part of a hologram is connected to another part. Of course. So entanglement, not only on the level of the living organism, not only on the microscopic domain, there is everywhere. But we don't easily perceive everywhere. For example, we need to enter into a deeply altered state to get information beyond the range of our eyes and ears, of our sensory perceptions. But that information is there, and we can just access it by suitable states of consciousness. So it would be a mistake to think of entanglement, non-locality, as applicable to certain type of phenomena. Everything is entangled, and everything is non-local. But we only perceive some more like this and some less like this. We still perceive billiard balls, so to speak, and we perceive the action of one ball on the other, pushing it according to calculable way to create the game of billiards. But it doesn't mean that the billiards would consist of separate balls. In nature, there are no separate things which interact mechanistically. In nature, all things are interact informationally. So it's all entangled, and we are discovering more and more, to the extent that our mind, our consciousness is open, entering into deeper states of consciousness, we can perceive more and more of this. And science, with its experiments going beyond the ordinary bounds of size and dimension, discovers the interaction. So also we can say that there is nothing completely separate from anything else. And because there is nothing completely separate, there is nothing like complete randomness. Because to have something random means it's cut off. It's what happens to it only because of what's in it, or what's around it, and not anything else. But if everything is connected with everything else, and in a quantum universe, in a quantum field, then whatever happens to any one thing, through its connection, is not independent, not random. It's connected, it's influenced, you can say, to some extent, is defined and determined by the whole system.
Kada se promatra primjerice živo tijelo koje je nemoguće promatrati do ostatka svijeta, naravno uglavnom smo se vodili idejom da je nekako biokemijski upravljeno, međutim pokazalo se da koherencija organizama nadmašuje konkurenciju biokemijskih sustava, da ljudsko tijelo ima milijardi stalica, da više od 10 milijuna stanica svake sekunde umire i nastaje. Kako jedan čovjek to rekao, kao dobar jazz band. Svaki svirač uživa slobodu izraza, ostajući u ritmu s cijelinom. I zbog toga se tu pokazalo da u stvari kod živog organizma možda možemo se zavarati pa pomisliti da su recimo neke biokemijske veze upravo one koje određuju koherenciju, mada je to zapravo možda jedno mikropolje organizma. No, postoji jedan drugi aspekt čovjeka, a to se zove svijest, i to je jedno istraživanje koje je nekako uvijek ostalo na rubu i dobivalo razne etikete, koje je također pokazalo da postoji koherencija i među udaljenim ljudima iz naše perspektive i da su na neki način kroz svijest i kroz razne fenomene se također manifestira nelokalnost i spregnutost. Pa pitanje je bilo kako se manifestira svijest i koherencija svijesti među ljudima. I koji su tu dokazi, eksperimenti koji pokazuju da se to zbiva, poput transpersonalnih iskustava i remote viewinga i rašljarstva i slično?
Well, we start with the assumption that all things are interacting, they are connected. That means that there is information being shared, communicated and shared between things. In that case, there is an element of commonness, a common element in all things. In identical twins, as long as they have the same experience, same surroundings, of course, this becomes very evident. They also can develop in different ways, of course. In some things that is more evident than in others. In a biochemical level, you can create substances which behave the same way, no matter where you put it, how many times you put it. But underneath it all, there is the factor of sharing information. Think of the entire universe as a hologram in which information is present everywhere. So coherence is present in every part of this whole. In some elements, it's more evident than in others. Now, in an everyday world, our brain, our nervous system, is not created to pick up elements of continuity because we need to survive. And on this perhaps 30 million year history of the human species and of higher mammalian species, the nervous system has developed in such a way that it can perceive individual entities because we need to perceive such entities and to find the food, find the mate, be able to survive, be able to reproduce, be able to create community. And therefore our brain and mind gives us a world of things which appear to be individual things that are connected by some means. So we see the particulate aspect of the world, of the quantum field. We don't see the field aspect. But the field aspect is there. Think of fish, for example. Fish, do they perceive the water? They certainly wouldn't perceive water molecules separately. Would they perceive waves? Would they perceive certain elements? Would they know that they are in water? That's their medium. The medium is everywhere. You don't see it as something separate. It took us a long time as human beings to perceive that air is something that is there, because air is transparent when it's clean. And we didn't realize that there is air until we started actually dealing with air. We knew that there's wind, but we didn't think of wind as being the movement of air, because air was not something separate. It was our medium. But when we start now using air as something that carries us with wings and motion, then we look at air as something which is our medium, and we describe it with the laws of aerodynamics, for example, just like the laws of the water or hydrodynamics. So we think of the medium that connects us as something special and in addition to us. Now, first we don't see it at all, then we see it as something separate, and the next step is to see that it is not separate, that the medium is us. We are an element of the medium. So everything that takes place in the field is that medium acting in certain ways. Certain elements of it interact with other elements. We could say that certain fluctuations, certain frequencies interacting with other frequencies. They are local coherent entities. There is nothing completely, totally separate. There is coherence all through the system, and we perceive it, only the mechanical matter-like elements of it. In altered states of consciousness, we perceive more. We perceive the underlying unity very often. In deep prayer, in Buddhism, in meditation, we perceive the connection. People are sensitive to each other. They see auras. They see how people influence other people, the energy fields. So we can do more than what our brain has been evolved to do. We can also see the connection, the connecting fields. But it takes an effort, and now with the new sciences, the quantum sciences, telling us that the reality is really the connecting field, then we are encouraged, we are given the impetus to see the world in terms of continuity rather than of separateness. And that's a big new step, and also an old step, because I think the ancient civilization very often talked about it in this way, the Brahman, the Tao, etc. But now we know that in science we have evidence, there are theories that show that really our connection to each other, our connection to the world, our coherence is universal. We are part of a universal, coherent quantum field.
Na mnogo načina se zapravo vidi ta povezanost, ne moramo ići samo do remote viewinga ili do iscjeljivanja, recimo telesomatika, odnosno interakcija s tijelima drugih osoba je poznata, zbog čega jedan liječnik čak rekao da bismo se mogli početi baviti nelokalnom medicinom treće ere nakon biokemijske i nakon psihosomatske, nelokalnom, i tu su došlo mnogo istraživanja liječenja molitvom, i zbog toga danas već i možemo nekako i ugraditi ovu vašu priču i kroz primjere tog što se događalo. U međuvremenu su i u Rusiji i drugdje se počeli razvijati ideja o torzijama i o vrtlozima. Na koji način i što bi zapravo bio taj nositelj informacije u vakuumu i koji kad je došao do ideje o tim torzijskim poljima? Prije svega su tu se pojavili neki Rusi kao Šipovi, Akimov, Mađar, Laszlo, Gazdag i još neki, ali koja bi bila uloga i možda recimo da kažemo geometrija tog medija koji mi ne možemo vidjeti i za kojeg još nemamo polje, a stari narodi su ga imali?
Well, in physics, they are discovering more and more states of matter, only they are not really matter in a classical Newtonian sense. More and more states. There are semi-liquid, quasi-liquid states, which are neither fully liquid nor solid. But they are states of a field in which information is carried. Whatever happens in any one part of these fields has an effect on all the rest of the field, which is always true. But now we can try to create theories in which to understand how these different states of matter, which are non-local matter states, how these operate actually. And by way of vortexes, for example, one theory, so Gazdag, they are information carriers. So the field that we perceive, the fields that we perceive, can be described in science by different theories. But the basic idea is always the same, that whatever element is appearing, surfacing, emerging in any one part of that total, complete quantum field also affects all the other parts. So a vortex here creates a vortex there, or maybe it's the same vortex appearing in different parts. We just, in scientific theories, we always individuate. We break down the continuum into comprehensible, observable, and repeatable elements. It doesn't mean that nature is broken down. But to understand things, we have to see it as specific entities occurring at specific points in space and time. But that's the nature of the theory. That's the nature of our understanding. In deep meditation, in deeper states of consciousness, as any Buddhist will tell you, for example, as any mystic will tell you, Christian mystic or any other will tell you, you don't see separate things. You are immersed in a total entity. We call it a field, but it's a total oneness of things. So distinguish theory from reality. Theories try to describe reality. In order to describe it, you have to break down reality into elements, into parts. Important thing is to know that this is a theoretical maneuver. It doesn't mean that reality is broken down into those parts. But reality is so complex. There are so many things happening simultaneously in this global quantum field that we must understand it bit by bit. So please let's distinguish our nature of our understanding from the nature of reality. Our consciousness, our perception, dealing with things. But a deep consciousness, an altered state, we are dealing with the whole. And this wholeness is the defining feature, I think, of the quantum sciences. We are recognizing that it is possible to conceive, to construct theoretically a quantum field as having the elements, all its elements integrated and all its elements interacting with one another.
Jedna od vaših knjiga zove se Znanost i akašičko polje. Zbog čega i kako ste našli sličnost između ovih suvremenih modela koji se bave prije svega nelokalnosti i koherentnosti sustava na razini svemira, organizama i svega što uopće postoji i tih drevnih koncepata o akašičkom polju?
You know, I didn't describe Akashic field, I just recognized and realized that it has been described several thousand years ago already. Now, often when people are shown that this what you are saying has already been known, then they are disappointed. I'm delighted because it shows that what people have come across instinctively, you know, through their inherent, inborn understanding, is likely to be reflecting reality. And if it really corresponds to what I'm saying on the basis of my rational explanations of the evidence, then it's reinforcing that explanation. It is already there. So I didn't know that I'm dealing with the Akashic field. I wrote several books in which this doesn't come up at all, until some readers, some colleagues have said, but you know, what you're saying really corresponds to what the ancient Hindu seers have called the Akashic, or the Akasha domain. You know. So I said I was delighted. Is that I looked at it as a beautiful description of that, for example, in a book by Swami Vivekananda, a great Indian guru, mystic, and theoretical, spiritual person. What he describes is really the same thing, I would say, as David Bohm in quantum science describes as the implicate order. What Plato described as the domain of the soul, of the forms, as Plotinus and other scientists are talking about, all scientists are talking about the oneness, the one, they call it. This is an old idea, and this old idea has been described by the Hindu seers thousands of years ago in such a way that if you just take the term that they use, which is Akasha, and instead of use quantum field, you get a perfect match. You don't need to use something different. You can just as well call it that. But because there are so many people today have heard about the Akashic chronicles, the Akashic memory, the Akashic field per se. What that is can be explained in these terms of a global quantum field. It has memory, it has connection, it has mutual interaction, and it contains everything that ever happened. It is a total global memory field, interactive memory field. So I call it that because it has been known as such. But I'm perfectly happy in my later book now, talk independently of that. Talk about the global quantum field, the macroscopic field, you know, of which we are a part. It's very encouraging to my mind that it has this idea of a deeper dimension which connects, which makes all things into part of a whole, that this idea has been coming up, has been discussed, and has been found convincing and profound for thousands of years.
Čini se da oko nas, kad se bolje pogleda na sve strane, susrećemo sve elemente koje svi sve znaju. Čestice znaju s kime se spojiti, ptice znaju kako letjeti na jug, biljke se znaju kretati suncu i to je jedan također od nekakvih pokazatelja da postoji nekakvo polje i znanja, informacija na koje se svako prema svojoj potrebi na neki način spoji. No, kada pričamo na ovaj način, može li se govoriti o tome da je priroda stvarnosti svijest i može li se da govoriti o tome da svemir na neki način evoluira ili smo mi zapravo dijelovi njega koji to rade ili na koji način se uopće može tako jedna kompleksna i pomalo nelogična situacija i nekako usustaviti?
Well, I would distinguish between universe, which is a domain of coherence in the cosmos, and cosmos, which is the wholeness, which is the underlying oneness of things. In this cosmos, with the Big Bang, 13.8 billion years ago, a domain of coherence came about, and this coherence evolves. Things evolve in that domain, and we call it the universe. This is our universe. It is possible that out of this potential quantum field, there are countless other universes evolving. But if we are not in connection, in information exchange with these other universes, we don't know about it. We can also only reason on the basis of theory. But it is no reason why we should believe that this is the only universe there is. But the universe, which is the coherence, which is the domain of coherence that has been created, as far as we know, with the Big Bang, that domain of coherence is evolving all the time. Everything is interacting in it, and there are more and more areas of coherence are coming about. More and more clusters of local fields, of frequencies that are in phase, that are in compatible frequencies, compatible magnitudes and phases and frequencies. So evolution is a constant fact. Nothing is stationary. Nothing can be stationary. Some parts of this evolving whole, of course, can fall back into lower levels of coherence. Other parts move forward. On the whole, it appears that on the level of the phenomena with which we can interact through our nervous system, that we can observe, that level seems to be evolving. There are, of course, countless species that are becoming extinct, and we are, with our folly, as human beings, contribute to the extinction of species, an enormous quantity. But the overall coherence of the biosphere, unless we really destroy it, which we can, it's increasing, this coherence. And the information, the written in one word, as the information on which the universe operates is evolving. But the information, the basic information that creates the universe what it is, that is a given. That is a universal constant. So that is there. It's like we mentioned about rules of chess. The rules of chess do not evolve, they stay. But the games of chess can evolve. In particular when you play a very complex game. So I think certainly there is evolution. Evolution is a fact. But what evolves according to certain laws and regularities and rules, and that is the universe, that is the evolving universe. We, as the evolving part of it, we follow the rules, we are influenced by the rules. When we are doing true science, real science, when we enter into a deeper state of consciousness, we can grasp more and more elements, more and more factors or aspects of these rules. And therefore, we can evolve in a coherent manner.
Stječe se dojam zbog povijesnih razloga kako se znanost razvijala i odvajala od svih drugih disciplina koje su bile i mistične, i ezoterične i religijske, da se nekako htjela riješiti i misticizma. Međutim, na ovoj razini razmišljanja znanost i misticizam se nekako približuju. I moglo bi se reći da se radi o nekakvom čak paradigmatskom iskoraku ili promjeni paradigmi. Pa mislite li vi da na neki način ova priča u stvari spaja znanost i misticizam. Ima li nešto u suvremenom znanstvenim razmišljanjima što na neki način zapravo čak možda bi je voljelo i izbjeći misticizam, međutim kroz ovu nelokalnu koherenciju koja opisuje tu stvarnost koju su u Indiji recimo zvali Brahman, doista se čini da se znanost i misticizam nekako spajaju.
I think all the great scientists have testified, have admitted that they work very much on the base of intuition, of a sense of how things are. My own experience, my writing, my theories, when I develop them, I have an innate sense of whether it is going in the right way or not. Does it make sense or doesn't make sense? And this is not just rational calculation. It's a sense or a feeling for it. And often I start doing something, exploring an idea, and then if it's good, it creates itself. It moves forward. If it's not, it comes across all kinds of obstacles and it doesn't make sense. So I think there is also on the intuitive level, there is no break between science and mysticism. Only science is the rational exploration of mystical insights. I call it spiritual experiences. I'm now working on a book with a well-known spiritual leading personality and with 10 or 12 other spiritual personalities, scientists, who are giving their own experience. And a book which it describes the spiritual experience and tries to make the connection between these insights that appear on the basis of these experiences that people have, including scientists, but also everyday person, and the connection with the discoveries in science. And what we find is that the new frontier sciences, this whole quantum field concept, is very close to what the mystics have been saying for thousands of years. So insight is one way to approach this. Rational exploration is another. We need both. But certainly a science which is confirmed by the spontaneous insights of the scientist's experience and the experience of other people around, that is more dependable, more credible than purely rational science, purely rational calculation. So I believe that there is no real gap. True, genuine mysticism and authentic science, genuine science, authentic science come to the same conclusions. And that is where the famous proof of the pudding that Engels talked about comes to the fore. We come to the same insights, whether we reach them spontaneously or whether we reach them through the exploration of observations. Ultimately, we live in the same universe. Whether we approach it this way or that way, that doesn't change. And we have different ways, we have avenues of exploring it. What we can be sure of, that our mind, our rational, conscious mind, only sees a part, a fraction of this total information field or quantum field in which we live, of which we are a part. So there is much room to explore, and we should not hesitate to explore it, as long as we get coherent, consistent explanations, and these explanations is minimally speculative. So they're as simple as possible, as clear as possible. As long as we can do that, I think we are on the good way. We are likely to approach the nature of reality. Nature of reality is complex, but it's not complicated. The complexity of the reality is emerging, is generating by some basic rules. And approaching these, I try to understand this, is to understand the heart of reality through a deeper level of consciousness, as well as through authentic and deep science.
Gospodin Laszlo, hvala vam na ovom razgovoru.
Okay, thank you.